Thank you very much, Zach, first of all, and secondly, thank you, Tom, for inviting me to share my views in this interesting conference. I had a good time now watching the presentation and listening to my friend Manfred. I'm going now to shift from Egypt a little bit to the Levant. Before I start speaking, let me just say that another thrill is the cooperation with Tom. Tom and me, we know each other, we have known each other for 45 years now, I think. Since the beginning of the 80s, we are good friends. And we now cooperate at the University of Haifa. As you probably know, I moved to Haifa and am now directing the new School of Archaeology and Maritime Civilizations at Haifa. And Tom and me and others are cooperating in Cyber-Archaeology and maritime studies. So we are looking forward for interesting future with Tom. So, Exodus and the Northern Kingdom, Israel. Biblical scholars have long noted, yes, let me tell you that in recent years, I usually do not read presentation lectures, but this time the lecture is a little bit complicated, so allow me please to read the lecture. Biblical scholars have long noted that Exodus tradition emerged from Israel, especially based on the prophetic literature, specifically the references in Amos and Hosea. In the first Exodus conference and the volume which followed, I mentioned in passing the role of the Northern Kingdom, the Kingdom of Israel, in the formation and development of the Exodus tradition. Today, I wish to elaborate on this theme. I will deal with the three periods in the history of the Northern Kingdom, which may be explored in relation to the Exodus tradition. The early days of the kingdom, that is the time of Jeroboam I in the late 10th century BC, the period of the Omride dynasty in the first half of the 9th century, and the days of Jeroboam's second rule in the first half of the 8th century. I will then present an update on questions of literacy and ability to compose biblical texts in Israel. For this, I should note in advance that I distinguish between oral traditions, or better said, the accumulation of oral traditions, and the composition of the text, that is, putting it in writing. So, first of all, let me concentrate now on the second half of the 10th century, the days of Jeroboam I. Link between the biblical Jeroboam I, the founder of the Kingdom of Israel, and Egypt is found in the Masoretic texts in 1 Kings, 11, 40, 12, and so on, and in the more detailed account in the alternative history and the Septuagint, 1 Kings 12, A to Z. Jeroboam is probably the most enigmatic of the Hebrew monarchs. He is not mentioned in any extra-biblical record, and hence some researchers raise questions regarding his historicity, like Frevel recently and Romer. But his outstanding legacy in the Bible tells a different story. First to consider is the repeated reference to his sins in the Deuteronomistic history, the first edition, if you wish, of which was composed in Jerusalem in the late 7th century. One can ask, one can ask what in the figure of Jeroboam attracted such animosity in Judah over 2 centuries after his supposed reign. Second, one can ask why an important Israelite monarch who ruled over a century after the days of Jeroboam I, I refer to Jeroboam II, carries his name. Some researchers saw this too as a hint that Jeroboam I is not an historical figure, but rather an invented personage by later authors. I would say the opposite. The son of Joash was called Jeroboam in order to commemorate the great founder of the kingdom, much admired in the north and hence despised in the south. Indeed, a royal tradition of Jeroboam I can be identified in the Bible. It is hidden behind the narrative in 1 Kings 11 and 12, and is perhaps hinted at by additional references in the Septuagint's alternative history on the division of the United Monarchy and the rise of the first monarch of the North. The Masoretic text is, of course, Deuteronomistic in nature, serving the ideology of Judah, and parts of it may come from the hand of an even later redactor. But an older layer seems to be cached behind it. The nature of the alternative history has been debated, whether based on pre-Deuteronomistic source, as suggested by Schenker, or late Midrash, as proposed by Talshir and Sweeney. This text elaborates on the Deuteronomistic material in Kings, but several pieces of information which do not appear in Kings may indeed come from an old source. Looking through these sources while removing evident later layers, mainly the references to activities of Solomon and Rehoboam, one can conceive of a story that included the following details. One, a hero named Jeroboam, his hometown, his father and mother, the reference to a prostitute mother in the alternative history, if old, may hint at a memory that he was a leader of an Apiro band who emerged in Zereda in the Ephraimite highlands, probably to be identified as a small stronghold in the rugged, isolated area northwest of present-day Ramallah. Two, his escape from now impossible to reconstruct trouble in Canaan to the court of Pharaoh Shishak, that is to say Sheshonq I of the 22nd dynasty in Egypt, and his return, possibly his marriage to an Egyptian woman, if the alternative history is to be trusted on this. Three, let me say that his coronation at Shechem in 1 Kings 12 of the Masoretic text, here a Deuteronomistic author replaced Jeroboam with Rehoboam, in my opinion. The Egypt connection in the story may stem from the Sheshonq first involvement in Canaan, attested by both his inscription, list of towns at Karnak, and his Megiddo block, which according to Bendor, Evian and Mir in a recent article, probably testifies for the construction of a fort or residency at the site. Sheshonq, on a mission to make Egypt great again, could have been instrumental in the rise of Jeroboam, that is, the Northern Kingdom. Jeroboam, with a background in Egypt and possibly an Egyptian wife, could have been installed on the throne as a vassal by the Egyptian campaign. The Egyptian campaign. Also note that northern adoration of Jeroboam I may be hinted by similarities between the story and his story and that of Moses, as suggested by Smend, Alberts, and others. Moses, the hero of the northern origin tradition, which was seemingly promoted by Jeroboam II. So there is a connection here between, if you wish, Jeroboam I, Moses tradition, and Jeroboam II. Esteem for Jeroboam I among Israelites who lived in Judah after 720, and the giant shadow cast by Jeroboam II were probably the reasons for the Deuteronomistic animosity toward Jeroboam I and the devaluation of the stature of Jeroboam II. I should note that Jeroboam and Rehoboam, here they are. I should note that Jeroboam and Rehoboam, the founders of the two Hebrew kingdoms, carry names of the same meaning. That is to say, the people or nation is increased or enlarged, same meaning. And that according to 1 Kings 11, 27, and 29, Jeroboam ruled in Jerusalem. This may hint that the two are in fact one, Jeroboam, and that he ruled over the territory of Israel and Judah combined, that is, over the central hill country and the western slopes of the Gilead. For this, he was admired in the north, and this may be the root of the United Monarchy, at that time still oral, of course, tradition in Israel. In this case, Rehoboam may be an effigy, Rehoboam, not Jeroboam. Rehoboam may be an effigy, introduced by the Deuteronomistic historian centuries later, when the Southern Kingdom usurped the idea of a great united monarchy and described it as having been ruled from Jerusalem. Van der Thurn and Alberts pointed to the possible function of the Exodus narrative as a charter myth in the days of Jeroboam I. Indeed, an old memory which stemmed from second millennium BC realities, as we just heard from Manfred, and others promote the same idea, could have been imported from the lowlands and developed into a strong tradition of salvation from Egyptian rule or liberation from Egyptian domination in Canaan. This may be understood on the background of the 22nd dynasty presence. Note in this connection that Egyptian ruled in Canaan during the time of the 22nd dynasty probably lasted for a while after Sheshonq. The liberation from Egypt theme in the north must have originated from this phase in history, as the next two episodes that I will describe in a moment cannot be read on a background of Egyptian domination over Israel. So we are moving now to the second item, the Omrides in the first half of the 9th century. This period is important for our discussion because of Omride territorial involvement in Moab, in Transjordan, which can illustrate the crossing of Transjordan tradition in Numbers 21 and Deuteronomy 2. The book of Numbers preserves a memory that Israel conquered North Moab from Sihon, king of Heshbon. The Mesha Stele reports that the Omrides established two fortresses in Moab facing Dibon, Jahaz and Atarot. Jahaz is to be identified with Khirbet el-Mudain and Temed, and Atarot with Khirbet Atarus. Most important, both places reveal typical construction methods of Omride sites, also west of the Jordan. South of the Arnon, the perhaps first, if you wish, seat of Mesha at Kir or Ir Moab, probably Khirbet Balua, may be hinted in the short chronistic note within the prophetic story of Joram, king of Israel, campaign against Moab in 2 Kings 3. The memory behind this note may be an Israelite attack on the capital of Moab as a reaction to Mesha's revolt, mentioned in 2 Kings 3. Another clue for the situation in South Moab can be found in line 31 in the Mesha Stele, which recounts Mesha's attack on Horonaim, probably Karak, south of the Arnon, south of Wadi Mujib. Line 31, here it is, says, and I quote, "En Horonaim dwelt therein," unquote. Evidently, a name is expected to follow. There is a legible bet here, followed by a partially eroded, partially broken section with space for 2 letters. This in turn is followed by a Vav and an unclear letter. Now, André Lemaire, reconstructed here Beit David, House of David, similar to the title of Judah in the Dan inscription. That is, and now I quote again, "En Horonaim dwelt therein the house of David." Recently, Naaman, Thomas Romer, and I came up with a different reading. We propose to read here instead the name Balak. We dare suggesting this on the background of the reference to Balaam in the Tel Der Allah inscription. If so, line 31 should be read as, and I quote, "En Horonaim dwelt therein Balak," referring to the king of Moab mentioned in the Balaam story in Numbers as the ruler of the area south of the Arnon. We are dealing then with crossing of Moab, confrontation with Sihon, king of Heshbon, all from the wandering tradition, a war at Jahaz, also in Numbers 21, and Balak. It seems that the wandering tradition from south to north is interrelated to the Omride conquest from north to south. Heshbon seems to have been a late Canaanite city-state taken over by the Omrides, and perhaps a memory of a war at Jahaz, a place fortified by the Omrides, also conceal this memory, conceals an event in the 9th century. Moreover, the Mesha inscription recounts the conquest of the Israelite town of Nebo. Here it is. referring to a temple of Yahweh there. I will return to Nebo later. Here, let me just say that it is another piece in the link between the crossing of the Jordan tradition in the wandering tradition and entrance to Canaan, of course, and the Omrides, another link. I also wish to note that the days of the Omrides can be seen as another episode of a united monarchy ruled from the north. This assumption is backed by, first, the Atalia story in the Book of Kings. Second, the participation of the king of the house of David, probably as a vassal in the confrontation of Israel with Aram Damascus, told in both the biblical text and the Tel Dan inscription. And third, the possibility that Israelite Joram, the king, is in fact the same monarch referred to in Judah as Jehoram, suggested by others as well, and I will deal with this in another place. This takes me to the third episode in the days of Jeroboam II, in the first half of the 8th century BC. In the first Exodus volume, I emphasized the activity of 8th century Israel at Kuntilet Ajrud in the picture, along the road which connected the head of the Gulf of Aqaba and the Mediterranean. And yes, I took this picture maybe 50 years ago, 45 years ago. I proposed in the first volume that the presence of Israelites, including scribes, at Ajrud is behind the knowledge of the desert as expressed in the desert wandering tradition. The contemporaneous early fort at Tel El Khalifa, located at the head of the Gulf of Aqaba, should also be mentioned in this context. And the rule of domination of Jeroboam II in Edom, which can be traced in the biblical text and archaeology, in my opinion, gave Israel control on the Eastern Arabian trade route. All this means intimate link between Israel and the southern deserts at the time. But there is more. I have recently advanced two ideas which may be linked to the role of the Exodus tradition in the north in the days of Jeroboam II. The first is a theory regarding a second period of rule of Israel in Moab, at least northern Moab, at the time. The period between Mesha and the Assyrian takeover, that is to say between 800 and 730 BC, is a lacuna in the knowledge of the territorial history of the region. Based on the domination of Israel over both northern and southern Transjordan, as well as the reality of exceptional knowledge of towns in Moab, in Isaiah and Jeremiah, it seems logical to suggest that Moab too was dominated by Israel. In fact, this period may shed light on the idea of the Israelites bypassing Moab from the desert on the east on their way to Canaan. A place to note in this connection is the fort of Khirbet Mudeibi in the desert southeast of Kerak, which may have been constructed by Israel, and this also to be treated elsewhere. And this leads me to the second idea, the idea regarding the promotion in the days of Jeroboam II of a system of northern temples related to major northern traditions. I refer to the traditions of the patriarch Jacob at Penuel and Bethel, the temples of Penuel and Bethel, the Ark at Kiryat Yarim, the conquest at Gilgal, and based on the mention of Yahweh of Samaria in the Kuntilet Ajrud inscription, the Exodus tradition at Samaria. To this can be added two sites. The first is the temple of Yahweh of Teman, also referred to in the Kuntilet Ajrud inscriptions, probably at Beersheba, as suggested by Naaman. I believe that the expression from Dan to, in this connection, I believe that the expression from Dan to Beersheba represents the reality behind the northern ruled united monarchy in the days of Jeroboam II. The second place is Nebo. Had Israel conquered the Mishor yet again, it could have re-established the temple there. And if so, this temple could have now been linked to the Moses tradition. To summarize this part of my talk, I should reiterate the link between the Northern Kingdom, especially in periods of prosperity, the Exodus tradition, and seemingly also the United Monarchy ideology, early United Monarchy ideology, Northern ideology. The Exodus tradition was deeply, in any event, the Exodus tradition was deeply entrenched in Israel. It migrated, quote unquote, to Judah only after 720. Let me now turn to the last part of my talk, dealing with the ability to compose, dealing with the ability to compose literary text in the north, in Israel. Speaking about biblical material that originated from the northern kingdom, as I mentioned earlier, a key question is the ability to put oral traditions in writing. The Tel Der Ala Balaam inscription, which dates to the early 8th century, certainly portrays such ability. Even if written in a local dialect, it comes from a site located in the heartland of Israel. And so is the contemporaneous literary inscription from Kuntilet Ajrud, not in the heartland of Israel, but related to Israel. Benjamin Zass and I have recently shown that the cursive script best seen at Gat and Rehob, which replaced the Proto-Canaanite in the early 9th century, lingered until late in that century. This means that the Hebrew script could not have appeared long before 800 BC. Indeed, its early appearance is best represented in the Samaria Ostraka and the Ajrud inscriptions, both dating to the first half of the 8th century. In Judah, Hebrew writing appeared in the late 8th century and proliferated in the 7th century, which means later. It seems later than Israel. It seems possible that Israelite literati influenced Judah either in the days of Jeroboam II domination over the southern kingdom, or when Israelite scribes, fearing deportation, moved to Judah after the takeover of Israel by Assyria. In fact, this was probably the way in which northern traditions, among them Exodus, arrived at Judah to be incorporated later into the Judahite biblical compositions. The digital epigraphy team at Tel Aviv University dealt with the proliferation of literacy in Israel and Judah. For the south, our study focused on the corpus of Ostraka from the remote fortress of Arad, which dates to the late 7th century or around 600 BC. We identified at least 5 hands and probably more in 16 of the Arad Ostraka, which present long enough text for analysis. Based on their content, they cover the military hierarchy of Judah from top down to the assistant quartermaster of the fort. This shows that close to 600 BC, literacy was widespread in the administration of Judah. The epigraphy team, our epigraphy team, then turned to the Samaria Ostraka of around 150 years earlier. Our work on this corpus, on the Samaria Ostraka, identified only 2 hands, probably scribes located in the capital, who received shipments of wine and oil sent from the countryside to the palace or the temple. This seems to hint, that composition of literary text in the north was performed by few trained royal and temple scribes. I refer to foundation myths, Exodus and the early Jacob cycle, royal traditions of Jeroboam, perhaps Jehu, heroic tales in Judges, and temple traditions such as the Ark narrative. I will get back to the Ark narrative in a moment. So, let me end this paper with breaking news from the lab related to the issue of composition of biblical text in the north, probably in the days of Jeroboam II. A few weeks ago, a team led by Shira Feigenbaum-Golovin, Alon Kipnis, Thomas Romer, and I published an article in PLOS ONE titled Critical Biblical Studies via Word Frequency Analysis, Unveiling Text Authorship. We introduced computer science methods to distinguish between authors or schools of authors. We first first, tested our method by comparing three corpora, assemblages of chapters from Deuteronomy, the Deuteronomistic history, and the priestly writing. We confirmed broadly accepted views in critical biblical scholarship and the accuracy or the doable, situation of the algorithm. So both ways. We so far no news. We then, and you can see here in the picture how there is an overlap between D, Deuteronomy, and the Deuteronomistic history, while P is set apart. We then turn to disputed texts, among them the two parts of the Ark narrative. Here we are back to the Ark narrative. In 1 Samuel 4, the first one, two parts, 1 Samuel 4 to 1 Samuel 7:1, and the second part in 2 Samuel 6. Scholars are divided regarding this text. Many follow Rost, 1926, a century ago, interpreting them as one continuous narrative. A while ago, following our excavations at Kiryat Yarim, Romer and I proposed that they date two different periods. The first, in 1 Samuel, comes from Israel in the early 8th century, and the second, in 2 Samuel 6, belongs to 7th century Judah. In the PLOS R, in the research, in the study reported in PLOS 1 in the article, we describe the two parts as Ark 1 and Ark 2. Our research proved Ark 2 to belong to the Deuteronomistic history corpus, while Ark 1 is different from all three corpora. Probably indicating or possibly indicating an early pre-Deuteronomistic northern composition, supposedly the hieros logos of the temple at Kiryat Yarim. Thank you.
Thank you, Israel. Yeah, so one question. Does anyone have a question? Yeah, Tom. Oh, sorry, Neil's up first.
Oh, Neil.
Yeah.
Hi, Israel. This is Neil Smith talking.
Hi, Neil.
Hey, so I really liked your theory of looking at the northern history story of the Exodus. One thing that has been troubling me for a while is where does Punon fit in the equation, right? Because Punon...
I can't understand. Where is?
Punon, Fenon, Punon. Where does it fit? Because apparently part of the itinerary is going to Punon after Ezyon Geber, right? But most theorists have said, like you suggested, that the Israelites passed to the east of Ezyon Geber and went up the east side of the plateau. So how can we fit these two things together if Punon is the Punon that we're saying is Fenon, or most people tie with Fenon? So what's your theory on that?
Well, first of all, I accept the identification of Fenan at of Punon at Chibet Fenan, of course. And this is a little bit to the south of the area of Moab. And how to put them together is a big question. But one thing is for sure that excavate, this is a challenge for you, for Tom, for you guys there in San Diego, an excavation at Punon should illuminate this and other questions related to the topic that we are discussing today.
Thank you, Israel.
Yeah, thank you, Israel.